The forest was quiet, almost too quiet, as if the trees themselves were holding their breath. Mist curled around the gnarled roots and twisted branches, hiding the path in silver haze. Somewhere in the distance, the faint call of a lone wolf echoed through the night, sharp and hollow. Among the shadows, a figure moved with cautious grace, the Omega wolf. His fur was dark as the midnight sky, eyes glinting like moonlight on water. He carried himself with quiet humility, but there was a weight to his steps, an invisible burden no one could see. Orphaned pups had begun following him weeks ago. They were scattered across the forest, small and frightened, from different clans, abandoned or left behind by the cruelty of the world. Somehow, they always found the Omega, their tiny paws padding silently on the mossy floor, as if pulled by an invisible thread. Wherever he went, they went huddled behind him, circling him, their trust absolute. The Omega did not understand it. He had spent years running from others, hiding from the world, convinced that his life was nothing more than shadow and loss. And yet, these little creatures seemed to sense something in him, something gentle, protective, even kind. He had never asked for company, and yet now, he could not bear to leave them behind. Tonight, the mist was thicker than usual, and the moon hung low, casting a silver glow across the forest floor. The Omega padded silently through the underbrush, his sharp ears catching the slightest rustle. The pups scurried around him, their tiny tails wagging, their eyes wide with curiosity and fear. They were restless tonight, as if the forest itself was holding a secret. He paused beside a fallen tree, its roots twisted like ancient hands. The wind whispered through the branches, carrying the faint scent of danger, something heavy and foreign. The pups shivered, their instincts screaming warnings they did not yet understand. The Omega's ears twitched. He had learned long ago to trust the whispers of the forest. "Stay close," he murmured softly, his voice low and steady, more for his own comfort than theirs. The pups pressed against him, finding warmth and reassurance in his presence. He had no idea why they were so drawn to him. Yet a strange responsibility had grown in his chest, a fierce and unspoken need to protect them. As he moved forward, a distant sound reached his ears, the rhythmic pounding of large paws. It was deliberate, strong, confident. The Omega froze, his muscles coiling like spring-loaded tension. Whoever or whatever was approaching, it was not small. The mist shifted, and a figure emerged through the silver haze. He was larger, more imposing than any wolf the Omega had ever seen. His fur was the color of storm clouds, and his eyes burned with an intensity that seemed to pierce the fog. The Alpha King. The Omega had heard tales of him, whispered from pack to pack. The Alpha King was a ruler of unmatched strength, a wolf whose presence commanded obedience and fear. He was the kind of leader who could crush lesser packs with a flick of his paw, who demanded loyalty and would not tolerate weakness. And yet, here he was, stepping silently through the forest, his gaze fixed on the Omega and the small band of pups surrounding him. The pups sensed the intrusion immediately. They pressed closer to the Omega, their tiny bodies forming a living barrier. They did not growl, they did not need to. Their loyalty, fierce and unyielding, spoke louder than any sound. The Omega's heart tightened in his chest. He had never faced a challenge like this before. The Alpha stopped a few paces away, his gaze never leaving the Omega. "You have a strange following," he said, his voice low, like gravel rolling down a cliff. It carried both curiosity and authority. "I am no one," the Omega replied quietly, his voice steady despite the tension coiling in his chest. "They follow me because I do what I must to protect them." The Alpha's eyes narrowed, studying him. "Protect them?" he asked, and there was a sharp edge to the words. "You cannot even protect yourself. Yet somehow, they trust you above all others?" The Omega did not answer immediately. He looked at the pups, who were pressed against his legs, their eyes shining with devotion. "They do not see me as weak," he said softly. "They see someone who will not turn away. That is all I can offer." For a moment, the Alpha King said nothing. The forest held its breath. Even the wind seemed to pause, as if waiting for what would come next. The Alpha stepped closer, and the pup's fur bristled in warning, but they did not move away. The Omega's instincts screamed at him to run, to vanish into the shadows where no one could follow. But something in the Alpha's gaze held him in place. A challenge wrapped in quiet fascination. "You carry a burden," the Alpha said finally, his voice softer, almost reflective. "I can see it in your eyes. Loss, guilt, perhaps even fear." The Omega flinched, though only slightly. No one had ever spoken so plainly of what he carried inside. Most would have mocked him, or attacked, or looked away. And yet the Alpha's eyes held no mockery, only a strange intensity, a need to understand. "I carry what I must," the Omega said, his voice steady again, but the words tasted bitter in his mouth. "And I ask nothing of anyone, least of all you." The Alpha's ears twitched. He stepped closer, circling the Omega slowly, like a predator, but not one of malice. He studied the small band of pups, then the Omega again. "Why do they follow you?" he asked, genuinely curious. "There is no law, no ritual, that binds them to you. Yet, they obey." "Why?" The Omega shook his head, unable to answer. Even he did not know the truth. There was something unnatural, almost magical, about the way the pups clung to him, a pull that went beyond instinct, beyond survival. He had felt it from the first moment they appeared, and it had grown stronger with each passing day. "Perhaps," the Alpha said after a long pause, "I should follow them, follow you, and see for myself." The Omega's eyes narrowed. He had faced hunters, rogue packs, and dangers far worse than this forest. But he had never faced a wolf like the Alpha King, powerful, commanding, impossible to ignore. "If you follow, do not interfere," he said quietly. "You will not understand unless you see it for yourself." The Alpha nodded, though there was a glint of something unreadable in his gaze. A mixture of intrigue, caution, and something deeper. Something the Omega could not yet name. "I will watch," he said, "but mark my words, secrets have a way of being revealed, even to those who would hide them." The Omega did not respond. He turned back toward the path, leading the small band of pups deeper into the forest. Each step was measured, deliberate, yet the weight of his past pressed upon him like an invisible chain. The pups followed silently, their trust unwavering, their presence both comforting and dangerous. For in a world ruled by strength and cunning, loyalty like theirs was a rare and precious thing, one that could draw the attention of kings and enemies alike. The Alpha followed at a distance, his massive form blending with the shadows. He watched the Omega move through the mist, noting the grace in his steps, the quiet authority that seemed to emanate without force. The pups clung to him, not out of fear or obedience, but because they felt safety, and perhaps something more. The forest seemed to shift as night deepened. Strange noises echoed from unseen corners, and shadows moved where there should have been none. The Omega's ears twitched, alert and cautious. But he did not falter. He had survived worse than this, and yet, a chill ran down his spine as he sensed the Alpha's presence not as a threat, but as a force he could not ignore. By the time the moon hung high, casting a silver glow over the forest floor, the Omega paused at the edge of a small clearing. The pups huddled close, their eyes shining with trust and hope. He looked back, half expecting the Alpha to reveal himself, but the forest held its silence, the Alpha still unseen, still watching, and somewhere deep inside, the Omega felt a stirring of something unfamiliar, an unease, yes, but also a flicker of curiosity. Who was this Alpha? And why did he follow? What did he seek? And more importantly, what would happen when the truth could no longer be hidden? The forest whispered its secrets, but it revealed none. The Omega led the pups forward, unaware that the path ahead would test him in ways he could never imagine. And far behind, cloaked in shadow and silence, the Alpha King followed, drawn not just by curiosity, but by something deeper, something that would change the fate of both wolves forever. The night stretched on, the mist thickened, and the forest seemed alive with anticipation. The Omega, the pups, and the Alpha were bound together by forces they did not yet understand, moving toward a destiny written in shadow and moonlight. And somewhere beyond the trees, a new story was beginning, one of loss, of loyalty, and of a bond that neither time nor danger could break. The forest had grown darker, the mist thicker, as if the trees themselves were conspiring to hide secrets from the world. The Omega led the orphaned pups carefully, their small bodies following with unwavering loyalty. He had learned to move silently, to sense the unseen paths, and to trust the whispers of the forest. Tonight, the wind carried a chill deeper than usual, and the Omega's fur bristled with unease. The Alpha King trailed behind, unseen but unyielding. He was a shadow among shadows, his massive form blending seamlessly with the mist. Every step was measured, every movement deliberate. He had followed the Omega for hours, watching not just the wolf himself but the strange, silent bond he shared with the pups. It was unlike anything the Alpha had encountered in his long life. No law or ritual could explain their loyalty. No pack command could enforce it. Yet, they followed the Omega with blind trust. The Alpha paused at the edge of a clearing, his golden eyes scanning. One of the pups, a tiny, black-furred creature with a timid gaze, stopped suddenly, ears perked. The Alpha's heart tightened. The pup sensed something. The forest seemed alive, trembling with unseen tension. From the shadows, a low growl echoed, a sound, not of the Omega, not of the Alpha, but something older, darker. The Omega froze, his own instincts screaming. He bent low to the ground, whispering to the pups. "Stay behind me," he said softly. They pressed closer, bodies huddled against him, their eyes wide with fear and trust. The Alpha watched, his pride and curiosity battling inside him. He had never seen a creature command loyalty without fear. Yet here was a wolf who did so effortlessly. Suddenly, from the thick mist, a pack of rogue wolves emerged. Their eyes glowed with a harsh red light, their fur matted and dark. They moved with unnatural speed, surrounding the clearing. The pups whimpered, but did not flee. Instinctively, staying close to the Omega. The Omega's stance hardened. He had faced danger before, but these were not ordinary wolves. Something in their presence felt otherworldly. Their growls carried a weight, a power that pressed down on the forest like a storm cloud. He could feel the air vibrate with tension, the wind carrying whispers of old curses long forgotten. "You're far from your pack," the Alpha's voice rumbled from the shadows, "and far from safety." The Omega did not turn. "And yet, I survive," he said quietly, "as do those who follow me." His eyes flashed toward the pups, who huddled like a small, trembling shield around him. The rogue wolves snarled, circling closer. But the Omega's presence held them at bay. There was something in him, a quiet strength that radiated outward, keeping danger at a careful distance. The Alpha stepped forward, emerging from the mist. His presence was commanding, yet he made no move to attack. The rogue wolves paused, as if sensing his dominance. The Omega's ears twitched, sensing the shift. Here was power that rivaled their own. "Why do they follow you?" the Alpha asked, eyes locking onto the Omega. "These pups, they are not yours by blood, and yet they obey." The Omega's gaze softened, almost painfully. "They follow because I do not abandon them," he said, "because I protect them when no one else will. That is all." The Alpha tilted his head, studying him. "It is not just protection," he said slowly. "There is something in the way they trust you. Something beyond instinct. I can feel it." The Omega shook his head, uncertain. Even he did not fully understand the bond. It had appeared suddenly, without explanation, and had grown stronger each day. There was magic in it, though he did not know its source. There was love in it, though he had never dared to name it, and there was danger, lurking in shadows he could not yet see. The rogue wolves lunged suddenly, their teeth bared, eyes glowing with unnatural fire. The Omega moved with fluid grace, dodging, circling, and using the environment to his advantage. The pups scattered slightly but stayed close, instinctively forming protective circles around the smallest among them. The Alpha leaped forward, massive paws striking with precision, sending a few rogues tumbling back. Together, the Omega and the Alpha fought not as enemies, but as allies. Though neither spoke the word, after a tense moment, the rogue wolves retreated into the mist, their growls fading into the distance. The forest returned to an eerie quiet, broken only by the shallow breaths of the Omega and the Alpha. The pups huddled closer, sensing the Alpha's presence, yet remaining fiercely loyal to their protector. "You fight well," the Alpha said, his voice low and steady. "Better than I expected." The Omega's ears twitched, a faint smile on his lips. "Survival requires more than strength," he said softly. "It requires understanding." The Alpha studied him, a flicker of something unreadable passing through his eyes. Pride, yes, but also fascination, and perhaps something deeper, something that neither of them fully understood. For hours, they moved through the forest. The Alpha followed, always at a careful distance, watching the way the Omega moved, the way the pups reacted to him, the quiet authority he held without force. The Alpha had led countless packs, commanded armies, and faced countless dangers, but he had never seen loyalty like this. Never seen a creature so quietly commanding, yet so vulnerable. As dawn approached, the forest shifted again. A strange light broke through the mist, pale and silver, illuminating a small glade. The Omega led the pups into the clearing, and for a moment, the world felt suspended, peaceful, fragile, and fleeting. But the Alpha's instincts warned him that peace was never lasting. The forest whispered secrets, and he knew danger would return. He watched the Omega with a strange intensity, seeing not just a lone wolf with orphaned pups, but a soul carrying pain, strength, and something unspoken. A magnetism that drew loyalty and protection in equal measure. The Omega settled in the glade, the pups curling around him like a living cloak of warmth. He closed his eyes briefly, letting the tension ease for a moment, but even in the stillness, he could feel the forest shift, the air tremble. Something was coming, something far greater than rogue wolves or even the Alpha King's curiosity. The Alpha stepped closer, finally revealing himself fully. The pups growled, but not aggressively. Their loyalty was clear. They would protect the Omega, yet they did not fear the Alpha entirely. The Omega opened his eyes, meeting the Alpha's gaze with cautious wariness. "You follow me," the Omega said softly, his voice carrying both curiosity and warning. "Why?" The Alpha did not answer immediately. He looked at the pups, then back at the Omega. "Because I need to understand," he said finally. "Because there is something in you. Something I cannot ignore. And because they are not the only ones at risk. There is a shadow coming. Something old. Something dangerous. You cannot face it alone." The Omega's heart tightened. He had faced shadows before, threats that clawed at his very being, but he had never faced someone like the Alpha, a wolf whose power could rival his own, whose presence unsettled him in ways he did not fully understand. "You do not belong in my world," the Omega said quietly. "And yet, you are here." "I am here," the Alpha said, his voice steady, "because I cannot turn away, and neither can they." He gestured toward the pups, whose eyes followed him, fierce and unwavering. For a moment, silence fell over the glade. The forest held its breath, the wind paused, and the mist curled like ancient fingers around the clearing. Two souls, burdened by loss and power, stood facing each other, linked by something neither fully understood, and in the shadows beyond, the forest whispered of danger, of trials yet to come, of loyalty tested and hearts challenged. The Omega knew that the Alpha's presence would change everything. He had survived alone, hidden in shadows, carrying the weight of the orphaned pups. But now, the path ahead was uncertain, and the Alpha so strong, so relentless would either be the greatest threat or the greatest ally he had ever faced. The pups stirred, sensing the tension in the air. One tiny black pup whimpered, ears twitching toward the edge of the clearing. The Omega stiffened, ears pricked, and a cold shiver ran down his spine. Something was moving in the forest, something dark and ancient, a shadow that did not belong to the Alpha or to the Omega. The Alpha's golden eyes met the Omega's. "We face it together," he said quietly, yet with undeniable force. "Or not at all." The Omega hesitated, then nodded. He did not fully trust the Alpha, not yet. But the truth was simple. The forest would not allow him to stand alone. And the pups depended on him. The first rays of dawn broke through the mist, illuminating the glade in pale light. The forest was quiet, but the Omega could feel it, the heartbeat of something coming. Something older than them all, and as the mist swirled around the Alpha and Omega, a silent promise hung between them. The path ahead would be dangerous, and neither of them could turn away. The forest had changed by nightfall. The mist had thickened into a ghostly shroud, wrapping around the twisted branches and the fallen leaves like a silent tide. The Omega led the pups cautiously through the dense underbrush, ears twitching at every whisper of wind and every faint rustle. He had grown accustomed to danger, but tonight there was a heaviness in the air he could not ignore. A dark presence that moved unseen, patient, and deliberate. The Alpha followed close, his eyes never leaving the Omega and the small band of pups. The storm of events earlier had left him unsettled. He had fought alongside the Omega against the rogue wolves, yet something in this night felt different. He could sense an unseen power. Something far older and darker than any forest predator he had faced. The Alpha had survived countless battles, commanded packs, and ruled territories. But the bond between the Omega and the pups was unlike anything he had witnessed. It was not fear that drove their loyalty, nor instinct alone. It was something deeper, almost magical. The pups pressed close to the Omega, their tiny bodies forming a living shield. They shivered, not from cold, but from awareness. The forest seemed alive, breathing around them. Shadows shifted unnaturally, and strange whispers threaded through the trees like tendrils of mist. The Omega's eyes flicked to each pup in turn, silently communicating calm. "We are not alone," the Alpha said quietly, his voice low, rumbling like distant thunder. "And it is not the rogue wolves we faced earlier. There is something else. Older." The Omega's ears twitched. He had sensed it too, a pressure in the air that carried both warning and promise. He had lived long enough to recognize danger when it came cloaked in silence. "I feel it," he admitted softly. "But we cannot flee. Not while they are with me." He glanced down at the pups, who looked up with unwavering trust. He could not leave them. Not ever. The Alpha studied him carefully. "You carry more than a pack with you," he said. "You carry something sacred. Something powerful. And the pups know it. That is why they follow you, even into danger." The Omega shook his head. He did not understand it fully himself. When the first orphaned pup had appeared weeks ago, he had thought it was coincidence. But as more came, drawn from distant corners of the forest, he had begun to feel a strange, unexplainable connection. They trusted him completely, instinctively, and he had begun to sense a strange energy, an invisible thread linking their lives to his. "Power?" he asked, suspicion lacing his tone. "I am no one. I am only a protector. Nothing more." The Alpha's gaze softened, but it remained steady. "Power is not always about strength," he said. "Sometimes it is in the heart, in the choices we make, in the lives we protect. You have more power than you realize." The Omega looked at him, and for a brief moment, He saw something in the alpha's eyes, a hint of admiration, of understanding, perhaps even longing. He turned away quickly, unwilling to face it. He had no time for such thoughts. Danger was coming, and it was closer than they could imagine. Suddenly, a sharp howl split the air. The pups stiffened, ears pricked, eyes wide. The Omega's body tensed. The Alpha moved beside him, massive form shielding him without a word. The sound came again, closer now, carrying a resonance that seemed to shake the trees themselves. It was no ordinary wolf's call. It was deep, commanding, and imbued with a dark presence that raised the hairs on the back of their necks. "They are testing us," the Alpha muttered. "Something wants to see if we are worthy or weak." The Omega's eyes narrowed. "Then we will not fail," he said quietly. The words were not bravado, they were truth. He would not allow the pups to suffer. He would not allow fear or weakness to dictate their fate. They moved forward cautiously, guided by instinct and a shared sense of urgency. The mist seemed to part before them, revealing a small glade illuminated by the pale light of the moon. The silver glow touched the grass and trees like a gentle caress, yet the beauty of the scene did nothing to ease the tension. Shadows danced unnaturally, twisting and shifting in ways the Omega had never seen. The pups circled him instinctively, forming a protective barrier. Their tiny growls were faint but steady, a chorus of determination that spoke louder than words. The Omega looked down at them, a soft, almost imperceptible smile touching his muzzle. They trusted him, and he would honor that trust with every step. Then, from the far edge of the glade, two glowing eyes appeared, golden, fierce, and ancient. The Alpha's muscles tensed. The eyes belonged to a wolf far larger than any he had seen in his life, and the presence radiated raw, untamed power. This was no ordinary threat. This was a guardian of the forest, an ancient creature bound to the magic that lingered in the land. The Omega stepped forward, placing himself between the Alpha and the glowing eyes. "Stay back," he commanded softly, yet with unyielding authority. The pups pressed closer, sensing his courage. The Alpha's gaze met his, steady and unwavering. "I will not interfere," he said quietly. "But neither will I leave your side." The ancient wolf advanced, moving with a deliberate slowness that made the ground seem to tremble. Its growl resonated in the bones of all who stood in the glade. The pups whimpered, but they did not flee. Their trust in the Omega anchored them, a protective force stronger than fear. The Omega's eyes glimmered with understanding. This was the test, the moment he had unknowingly prepared for. He stepped forward fully, meeting the ancient wolf's gaze. Without flinching, the Alpha mirrored him, a silent sentinel ready to act if the Omega faltered. "Why do you follow me?" The ancient wolf's voice rumbled, deep and resonant, carrying through the trees as though spoken by the forest itself. "Why do these young ones cling to you?" The Omega's voice was steady, yet quiet, filled with a quiet strength. "Because I protect them, because I will not abandon them, because I am their shelter, their family, until they can stand on their own." For a moment, the forest fell silent. Even the wind paused, as if listening. Then, slowly, the ancient wolf lowered its head slightly. The pups' tails wagged tentatively, sensing approval, and the tension in the glade eased. The Alpha's eyes widened slightly. He had not expected the ancient guardian to yield. Yet here it was, acknowledging the Omega's authority not through strength, but through courage, loyalty, and heart. "You are stronger than you realize," the Alpha said quietly, voice almost lost in the stillness. "Not because of force, but because of what you carry inside." The Omega turned to him briefly, eyes meeting his. For the first time, there was no caution, no defense, only a silent understanding, a bond forming in the quiet aftermath of danger. He did not speak, but his gaze conveyed what words could not: trust, acknowledgement, and something deeper that neither dared name yet. The pups circled closer, tails wagging, ears perked, eyes bright. They were safe, for now, and the Omega allowed himself a brief moment of relief, though he knew the forest's shadows never stayed hidden for long. "Come," the Omega said finally, leading them forward again. "We must move before the next shadow finds us." The Alpha fell into step beside him, massive body moving with quiet precision. For the first time, he did not dominate the path he followed, choosing to trust the Omega's instincts, and the Omega, though wary, did not push him away. Together, they moved through the mist, the pups scattering and regrouping around them like a living chain of devotion. The night deepened, the moon rising high and casting its pale glow through the mist. The forest seemed to breathe around them, alive with whispers and shadows. The Omega could feel the threads of magic binding him. The pups and the forest together. A fragile, powerful connection that would determine the fate of all who walked these paths. And the Alpha, silent and vigilant, began to understand the truth. This Omega, though small and quiet, commanded something far greater than strength alone. He commanded loyalty, trust, and a power the Alpha had never known. And for the first time in his life, the Alpha felt a pull, an unspoken bond forming between him and a wolf he had come to follow, out of curiosity but now could not leave behind. The forest had grown silent in an unnatural way. Even the wind seemed to hesitate, and the mist thickened. Swirling like living smoke, the Omega stood in the center of the glade. The pups huddled close to him, their tiny bodies trembling but steadfast. He could feel the darkness approaching a force older than any wolf or pack he had known. The hairs on his neck stood on end. This was the shadow that had been stalking them, the one that had tested his courage, patience, and heart. The Alpha King moved beside him, massive and unyielding. His presence was a shield, and though the Omega had never trusted another with such closeness, he could not deny the comfort it brought. The Alpha's golden eyes were fixed on the mist, watching for movement, reading every shadow, every ripple in the air. "This is it," the Alpha murmured, voice low but steady. "Whatever comes, we face it together." The Omega nodded. He could not have asked for stronger protection. Yet he felt a strange warmth, something unfamiliar, something stirring deep within. It was not fear, though the danger was real. It was trust, and perhaps, for the first time in his life, hope. From the darkness, a massive form emerged, larger than any wolf the Omega had ever seen. Its fur was black as midnight, blending seamlessly with the swirling mist, and its eyes burned like molten gold. The forest seemed to darken around it, the air trembling with its power. This was no ordinary wolf, no simple predator. It was a guardian of the old magic, ancient and relentless, testing the Omega for reasons unknown. The pups pressed even closer, tails tucked but eyes shining with courage. The Omega stepped forward, ears pricked, fur bristling. "Stay behind me," he commanded softly, and the pups obeyed without hesitation. The Alpha moved closer as well, muscles taut, ready to strike at the slightest threat. Yet, he did not dominate. He followed, allowing the Omega to take the lead, as if acknowledging the unseen power that flowed through him and the pups. The ancient shadow circled them slowly, its gaze sharp and knowing. The Omega sensed that this was a trial, a judgment not of strength, but of heart. The pups' bond to him, their trust, was a key. If they faltered, the shadow would strike. "Why do they follow you?" The shadow growled, voice deep and vibrating like the forest itself. "Why do they obey without fear?" The Omega's chest rose and fell steadily. He met the shadow's gaze without flinching. "Because I protect them. Because I will not abandon them. Because they are my family, and I am theirs. That is enough." For a moment, the forest held its breath. The wind ceased. The mist paused. The Alpha watched in awe as the shadow considered the Omega's words. Then, slowly, the creature lowered its massive head slightly, and a low rumble echoed through the clearing. Approval. The pups wagged their tails cautiously, sensing the shift in the air. The Omega exhaled, tension leaving his body just slightly. And the Alpha allowed himself a faint, approving nod. They had survived the first test, but the forest remained tense. The shadow did not retreat completely. It lingered, a constant reminder that danger and challenge were never fully gone. The Omega understood that this was only the beginning of a journey he could not face alone. And now, he knew the truth. The Alpha was no longer just a follower. He had become a partner in survival, in leadership, and perhaps in something deeper, unspoken. The moon reached its peak, casting silver light across the glade. The mist twisted and parted, as if bowing to the forest's ancient magic. The pups stirred, and the Omega felt it, an invisible thread connecting him to each of them, pulsing with quiet energy. This was the bond that had drawn the Alpha to follow, that had protected them through danger, and that now allowed the Omega to stand firm in the face of shadows. "You carry a power beyond strength," the Alpha said quietly, voice low but intense. "Not just the magic of the forest, but the magic of loyalty, courage, and heart. You command it without knowing it." The Omega's ears twitched, uncertainty in his gaze. "I do not understand it," he admitted softly. "I only know that they trust me. That is all I can do." The Alpha stepped closer, massive shoulder brushing against the Omega's. There was no aggression in the touch, only solidarity. "You do not have to understand it," he said. "You only need to embrace it, and accept that some bonds, some hearts, are stronger than the shadows that come for them." The Omega felt something stir deep in his chest, a warmth he had never felt before. He had carried loss, fear, and solitude for so long that he had almost forgotten the meaning of trust, of connection, of being seen and understood. The Alpha's presence, solid and unwavering, reminded him that he was not alone. The shadow shifted, restless, sensing the closeness between the Omega and the Alpha. It prowled, circling again, testing their resolve. The pups growled, tails high, fur bristling. They were ready to defend, yet their trust remained in the Omega's hands. "You are not alone," the Alpha said quietly. "They are with you, and I am with you. Together, we can face this." The Omega's eyes softened, and he gave a slow, deliberate nod. For the first time, he allowed himself to feel more than survival. He allowed himself to feel connection, strength, and even hope. The shadow lunged suddenly, moving faster than the eye could follow. The Omega stepped forward instinctively, pups flanking him, Alpha at his side. The ground shook with the impact of power and speed, but together, they held their ground. The bond between them, Omega, Alpha, and pups, was stronger than fear, stronger than instinct, stronger than darkness itself. The shadow paused, eyes glowing, as if weighing their courage and unity. The Omega's gaze was steady, unwavering. The Alpha's presence radiated confidence, trust, and protection. The pup's loyalty and bravery shone like a living shield. And then, slowly, the shadow receded, melting back into the mist as if acknowledging their victory. The forest exhaled, the tension lifting slightly. The moonlight bathed the glade, silver and serene. The Omega sank to his haunches, pups crawling close, curling against him like a living blanket. The Alpha remained standing, massive form tense, watching the darkness fade. "You have led them well," the Alpha said quietly, his voice carrying both admiration and something softer, something unspoken. "And you have led me as well." The Omega's eyes met his. For a long moment, silence stretched between them. Words were unnecessary. Trust had been forged in the trials of the forest, in the bond with the pups, and in facing darkness together. Something unspoken passed between them, understanding, respect, and perhaps the beginning of something deeper. The pups yipped softly, breaking the quiet, and the Omega smiled faintly. He had survived, but not alone. And now, for the first time in years, he felt the possibility of family, of protection, and even of connection beyond survival. Come, the Omega said finally, standing. We move forward. The forest may hide more shadows, but together, we can face them. The Alpha nodded, falling into step beside him. He did not dominate. He did not command. He followed. And the Omega, for the first time, allowed him to. The forest stretched before them, silver and misty under the moonlight. The pups scampered ahead, weaving between the trees, confident and safe in the Omega's care. And as they moved, the bond between Omega and Alpha deepened, a connection born not of dominance or submission, but of respect, courage, and unspoken trust. As dawn approached, the first rays of light broke through the mist, painting the forest in gold and silver. The Omega paused briefly, looking at the Alpha, then at the pups. Their lives were intertwined now, connected by loyalty, courage, and heart. The Alpha spoke softly, almost to himself, yet loud enough for the Omega to hear. You have changed me, in ways I cannot name. The Omega's gaze softened. And you have changed me, he replied. We are stronger together. And perhaps safer. The pups yipped happily, their tiny tails wagging. They were safe. For now. The forest, though still ancient and full of mystery, seemed a little less threatening. The shadows had tested them, but they had survived not just through strength, but through unity, trust, and heart. The Alpha looked at the Omega, eyes warm yet steady. Whatever comes next, he said quietly, we face it together. And no shadow, no matter how old or dark, can break what we have built. The Omega nodded, feeling a sense of peace he had never known. For the first time, he allowed himself to believe that family, loyalty, and connection were not just survival, they were life itself. And high above, the moon hung full and bright, a silver witness to their bond, their courage, and the beginning of a future built on trust, heart, and unity.